Hello and welcome to the first gameplay podcast of 2023. A very happy new year to you listeners. And unfortunately, like I mentioned on the supporter content pod, 𝗵𝗚 is unfortunately dealing with COVID in the family, so is taking the week off. But yes, we have an exciting lineup this week with, as we so often have had recently, SpreadsheetFIFA, aka Josh. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. And clearly the COVID is really getting to 𝗵𝗚s because he thinks 𝘃𝑫𝗏𝗏 is bad and he's just not. So
yeah. We kind of convinced him on the pod that this was something that he should do. I mean, I haven't used him. It was a collective effort from Hugh and you and loads of people have said he's really good, but 𝗵𝗚's not a fan. I'm sure we'll be back to talk about that in the near future. Now, I wanted to come to you, Josh, just quickly, because for those who didn't catch the content pod, not yet supporters, if you'd like to be one, just search Support for It Weekly. Might not have heard you talking about the fact that League SBCs are finally here. You'll have plenty of content about that in the coming weeks, including on this podcast and beyond.
Oh yeah, 100%. SpreadsheetFIFA, if you want to see any of that. I've said how I would grind it a few times.
Perfect. And yes, this is a gameplay pod, so we have gameplay expertise. In a second, first of all, we have Brammers. Hello, welcome to the pod.
Hello, Happy New Year. Yes, I'm definitely not the gameplay expertise.
I'm sure you have.
That is our next guest.
And you did say you've been doing all right.
I'm doing all right, but that's because I haven't been playing. So I'm still being paired with people who have only just got the game or developed motor function.
Nice. And for those who don't know, Brammers is a gameplay critic and consultant, and long-term friend of the pod, not been on for a while, so it's good to have you back. Up next, bringing the gameplay expertise as a pro player, it's Dr. Nightwatch, aka 𝘵𝘵𝘁𝗍𝘬𝘐. Happy New Year.
Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Yeah, great to have you back. And since you've been on last, we've had a lot of content, as you'd expect. But the Christmas period has brought some pretty competitive-looking players. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll make it into a pro player squad because of the squad restrictions and that need for, I guess, familiarity with those players. But have any of them taken your fancy recently?
So I haven't been using many of them, but for one, you have the loans of the WinterWildcards, which at pro level is really good because we can use loans. So I'm looking forward to using some of the loans I've gotten. I think in terms of pro teams, you'll probably be seeing 𝘵𝑚𝑑𝑦, obviously. Probably Varane, although I'm not that sure he's that good this year.
Okay.
Benzema is an interesting one. You have to see how he really plays in game. But in terms of the Winter Wildcards, I think last year was slightly a better promo, at least from a pro usability point of view. Other than that, I think I'm looking forward to like the Centurions promo that's yet to come out, and obviously Team of the Year.
And in terms of players you've used, Brammers, I know you hinted at the fact you'd talk about Toni Kroos, which is an SBC people can still complete if they'd like to.
Yeah, it's available until January 9th. It's about 260k according to foot.gg. And nice. He is, it's Toni Kroos, 5-star, 5-star. I imagine there are shortcomings that mean he is not suitable for very high level play, but I had Rodrigo de Paul as well, and I was looking for a midfield combo that would get some chemistry. And he's been nothing short of excellent for me. He's got base 96 short and long passing, fantastic vision, really high, like 94 reactions and I think 92 composure. And, it's nice to have that. It's always a meme, is there going to be a usable Toni Kroos in FIFA? And obviously we have to wait for a special version, but it's nice to have him in there. He plays beautiful football off either foot. And I love having a 5-star skiller in the center of midfield, like just doing ball roll scoops around people and breaking passing lanes that way and stuff. Just fabulous fun. Obviously quite an expensive card, but I know that I won't need to change my midfield for weeks, probably until at least Team of the Year.
Yeah.
So very happy with it.
And does he feel good on the ball? What chemistry style do you have on him? Because I was wondering whether he did actually feel good on the ball, because he's not the most agile, is he? And he's got like 84 dribbling or something.
I don't know. He feels really good to me. I've got Shadow on him just for the bit of extra pace. I don't know if that's optimal, but the things I do with it, I just I do elasticos and ball roll scoops and flick the ball over people's heads and stuff, and it feels really good to me. He can move nicely in sort of tight spaces and then bash the ball through to an attacker sort of out of nowhere. Yeah. I feel very comfortable when he gets the ball. I've tried a lot of midfielders who sort of flatter to deceive, seem like they would be good, but end off feeling a bit clunky. But no, he's felt very smooth to me.
Yeah, that's good. And we can move on to you, Josh. Anyone you would like to review yourself?
Joao Felix, the Winter Wildcards. I got 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀 𝗂𝘁 and so with him as 5-star, I've been kind of looking for good links, especially club links, so that then it's fairly easy to get him on full chemistry. And so I was kind of just waiting for a special Felix, and this has not disappointed at all. I bought him because, I had some coins burning a hole in my account, and I decided I wanted to give him a go. And honestly, exactly what you'd expect him to be. Really, really nippy on the ball. I felt like he was a little slower than I was expecting him to be. But, actually maneuvering the ball, whether it be shooting or passing, he was good technically in both areas. I definitely felt like the 𝗫𝘃 composure really helped there too. And kind of weirdly strong, which I wasn't expecting. Kind of his stats don't suggest it, but he didn't get knocked off the ball too much. And I also think players that have the ability to move from a wing, from like any wing position and centrally, are really, really valuable in terms of team building. Like he can play striker, centre forward, right mid, and right wing. And so it allowed, you can change your team up and he can move about and still stay in it. I would be surprised if his price really like tanks too much further. 5-star, 4-star isn't going to be superseded by like a 5-5 player too soon. And, you compare him to somebody like the Dembele Winter Wildcards. I think they're quite a solid comparison in terms of, both are tricky, skillful attackers. Dembele, obviously, a little bit more memey. And yeah, I've really enjoyed him. He's like 600k, which is quite expensive. But yeah, I think you'll get more production out of him, or more consistent production out of him, than you would out of Dembele, who's going for a similar price.
Yeah, talking of 5-star skills, I've used 𝘵𝘂𝘀 for his 4-game loan plus some extra in friendlies and felt he was very, very good. It's just that thing of whether you want to commit the 1 million coins worth of fodder to him, whether he fits your team, whether you don't mind the slight problem he could cause if you don't have Brazilian players for chemistry. So I don't know. I'm not going to say go out and do him definitely because he's amazing, but he is amazing. It's just whether that is worth the commitment with things potentially to come. I wanted to move on to a little bit of tactics chat, and something I was noticing when chasing the game with a 3 at the back formation, 3-4-2-1, I actually found it was really good against 4-3-2-1 players, and was wondering, even though we talked about 3 at the backs not being so relevant this cycle on a past podcast, what your thoughts were on this, Ivan, especially with that being so prevalent, the 4-3-2-1 in the pro scene.
So I do think 3 at the back is effective against the 4-3-2-1 more than other formations in terms of defending it. But I don't think it's that good when going forward against the formation that defends in a 4-4-2. So again, I think it's somewhat of a mismatch because the 4-3-2-1 is so kind of overpowered. It does counter defensively because you have kind of 3 center backs against the 3 strikers. So kind of you always man mark, so to speak, whereas when you have 4 at the back, they're always in between the defenders. So it's really easy for the AI to do that run through ball and you're in, even when you're around the box. The only thing with which it doesn't help, like the main thing, is again, you have 2 midfielders against 3. So it's very easy for your opponent to keep the ball in the center of the pitch and find their strikers or go down the wings. And just generally, I think in theory, the best formation that would work against 4-3-2-1 is a formation with 3 center backs and 3 midfielders. So a 5-3-2, a 3-1-4-2. But those formations don't really, for one reason or another, separate issues, don't defend the way they should. So the 5-3-2, the center mids, if you've ever played it, they play really wide. It's not, they don't stay in the middle of the pitch like the 𝘬𝘂𝘂𝘁. They play between a winger and the center mid. So they're kind of useless. It's really easy to play around them, really easy. And the 3-1-4-2, it just doesn't work as intended. You have 2 left mids and 2 right mids and 1 center mid. So it doesn't work the way it's intended at all. So the only 2 formations that in theory would help you out against the 4-3-2-1, they don't work. So I don't think like the best counter to it is just matching it and just hope you're better. So Yeah, and to answer your question, at pro level, last year I know there was a lot of 3-5-2s. I think this year some people tried it, but just because the 4-3-2-1 is so good, I don't think people people have given up on the 3/5 backs. Even Dylan Mike, who has been a sworn 5-back player since the start of last year, has obviously switched because you can't not. I know a lot of people use 4-4-2, but you have to be really, really, really good to use that. I think only really 𝘃𝗲𝗿, 𝘠𝘅, and Anders, top of my head, are consistently good with them.
Yeah, I think also the 3 in midfield allows you to cover the fullbacks better. And I do think, at all levels of the game, fullbacks going forward can be really, really helpful for unlocking defenses, it's fair to say.
So even at pro level now, you see a meta develop where people aren't satisfied with sending one fullback forward. They send 2 fullbacks forward, and I'm guilty of it. I've been playing that for the past month, and I've never been better at this game. I just send both fullbacks forward, and I have 2 center backs at the back. If I get caught on counters, fine, but I have pacey defenders. And it's one of those where kind of the real life football principle, you don't want to get caught on counters. You want to always end your attack with a shot or like a chance for the ball to go out of play. Just because in FIFA, when you do that, immediately from the goal kick, you defend on a 4-4-2. And your fullbacks are back, your team is back in defensive shape. Whereas if you lose the ball and get countered, you have 2 center backs, realistically. So it either becomes a game of an end-to-end game where you counter each other, or it just becomes a game where you overwhelm your opponent with your fullbacks and there's little they can do.
And actually, we should hear from our other guests here. Brammers, any tactical questions, any tactical points? What's been working for you?
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to the discussion about the 4-4-2 because that's the one I'm using. And I'm not a very tactical person in FIFA. I don't, for whatever reason, have the strategic brain for it. But I tend to find something that just kind of works for me and then play around it. And 4-4-2 has been my jam this year with, really basic instructions like 71 depth, press after possession loss, a bit of stay back on a few players, and that's about it. And I sort of play to whatever the meta is. So the biggest sources of goals are kind of wide play, particularly because there's so much pace now. You can just run around the opposing team. And then sort of those neat little passing combinations around the box and lots of L1 dribbling and Trivella's when I'm feeling a bit naughty. But the thing that I can't do at all is defend with it. Just absolutely every game is either I said this on the other podcast, is either a 2-0 kind of rage quit or it's like 6 goals each. And it's a toss up who will win. It's the most goals I can remember in a FIFA game, both scoring and conceding. And I just kind of assumed that because I was scoring so many, which is not typical either, that I was conceding because the game is quite hard to defend it comparatively. But now listening to what Ivan's saying, I'm wondering whether it is that I'm just using a formation which leaves me very open. If you were sort of advising somebody who was generally having no issue scoring, but was having a lot of trouble keeping stuff out at the other end, is there a particular formation or approach that just on a very basic level you would advise people to sort of move towards?
Well, I'm actually surprised that you score a lot with 4-4-2 because I think the formation generally is harder to attack with this year compared to other formations.
Interesting.
Maybe the reason you can see so much is because what your opponent is playing. As I said, once you face the 4-3-2-1, it's very difficult to keep a clean sheet or just low amount of chances against yourself. I mean, if you have no issues of scoring, it's always worth trying a 3/5 back or a more congested midfield. But I think you would kind of ruin something that works for you going forwards. I think it's just being more patient in defense or just coming to grips with the fact that you will concede, so might as well just outscore your opponent. That's my approach this year, and it's been working out well for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't mind it. Like, to be honest, I'd rather have a high-scoring, fun game than a kind of atrocious sort of game where I just can't seem to get anything together. So I've been enjoying it a fair bit.
Yeah, I think it's probably similar for myself, to be honest, in terms of games generally being quite high-scoring. But Josh, what about you? Is that a similar experience to you? And are you playing the 4? I think you were playing a bit of narrow, weren't you, before?
I was playing narrow on 100 width. So I was
that was it. Yeah.
kind of things in FIFA tend to work a lot on the extremes, and so I was seeing if I could go with a narrow formation, playing 100 width, and see how that works, and I enjoyed it. But I've just gone back to my kind of old trusty 4-2-3-1. I feel like it gives me the most kind of comfortability. That's not a word, but it makes me feel comfortable when I play with it. I know the passing lanes that I can use. I feel defensively solid. It still gives me enough going forward. And I have, like, in my tactics, I'll have at least 2 of my tactics will be in that formation with a slight variation of instructions so that I can get a DM to go forward or get a wing back to go forward, just kind of change it up a little bit without completely changing formation and having to try and play a different style within the same game. I found it interesting when you were talking about Varane and you said you felt like Varane wasn't really it this year. What is it that a pro player would look at in somebody like Varane and go, he's not really it, compared to whatever the kind of meta centre-back is that's being used right now?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say he's not it. He would obviously be a choice for a lot of people. But I think, especially this year with chemistry, at pro level, if you want to have that 33 out of 33 points, you have to be kind of picky. And I know Varane is United French BPL. But with the way, I don't know, the choices are at pro level and the 90% of the team that you're in a way forced to play, maybe 5-6 players you would see in every team. I think you have center-back pairings that you're kind of used to or that you're pretty reluctant to change. And especially with the way, I don't know, with the way Varane has been this year, kind of a body type and just the way he's been on FIFA this year. I didn't like his regular item at the start of the year, which for me is kind of comparable to this item now because of the meta. He is a really, really good item, but I think me personally, I like more kind of bulky players. Your Van Dijks, your Koulibalys, your Gvardiol, for example, speaking of players, is probably one of my favorite center backs in the game this year. The new, well, not new at this point, the Moroccan center back, the 𝘭𝘃𝗏𝗏, kind of the more bulky, the bigger defenders that can just quick and strong. And I just don't think Varane falls into that bracket or just his body type kind of in game because he's unique. He's not the high and average or kind of the bulky unique. So that's the reason at pro level, but I would say that's kind of maybe grasping onto straws. I'm sure a lot of pros would like him. But put it that way, if you had an unlocked account, I don't think you would see people using Varane over some of the other defenders we currently have in the game.
You don't know how happy you've made Ben talking about 𝘭𝘃𝗏𝗏, by the way.
I was about to mention that. I did use him quite a while, and it is just that pace, really. I mean, he's ridiculously good in the air, actually, too. But yeah, his speed across the ground was really nice. But I mean, honestly, nothing compared to 𝘭𝑪𝘑𝗪𝘏 now. I mean, the difference between max pace and like mid-90s pace is even noticeable. I would say noticeable. 𝘭𝑪𝘑𝗪𝘏 can actually catch up with players that other centre-backs weren't necessarily catching up to, even 𝘭𝘃𝗏𝗏 with his high pace. And actually, I mean, I like having pros on because they often talk about how important pace on centre-backs is. I really think it is. And I'd be interested to know, though, because a lot of pros have been using 𝘭𝑪𝘑𝗏, right? He's not actually super fast, but having played against him, he definitely has enough in the other departments to kind of compensate for not having the very top end pace. But I was just wondering, what is the go-to centre-back wise, do you think, at the moment for most pros? Obviously, there are some squad limitations, which are a factor in what people choose. But
yeah, I do think the 𝘭𝑪𝘑𝗏, and you mentioned he doesn't have that high pace, but one, I think his body type, like the high and average, it stands out. And I think this year, you notice the 90 plus, like 92 plus defending more than in previous years. I think you notice it more and more every year. And I think 𝘭𝑪𝘑𝗏, ever since the start of the year where he had 91 and now the 93 on the new item, you can definitely feel it with the body type. Obviously, he is slightly slower compared to like a Varane or another type of center back, but it's kind of a must-have in your team. Just for comparison, I don't think Militao is that good either, and I think a lot of pros kind of agree. I don't think we've liked Militao as much Or even a base Maldini. I remember using him at the start of the year, even when you could have made him lengthy and it was meta. I didn't like him that much. I just didn't feel he was kind of strong enough, and he didn't have that Lucio kind of aura. So I think a Lucio Van Dijk partnership is maybe slightly too slow, but a Lucio 𝘭𝘰𝘐𝑰 or a Lucio 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦. Right now I'm using 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 just because of kind of an asylum fodder. So, and I think it's a really, really good partnership. They're really quick. They're really strong. They're good in the air. Left foot, right foot. So I think those type of center backs, they're kind of a must-have this year, especially at competitive level where you have to play against the R9s, the 𝘵𝘇s, the Ginolas.
On that, let's take a break, and I'm going to be back in just a moment to ask about crossing. Hello, and in this break, it is a new year, so it's a time for looking back and looking forward, and I wanted to say thank you very much for all your support again in 2022 and moving forward into 2023. The pod has now been running for, well, it's into its 8th calendar year, which is crazy, something I'd never thought would be possible. And frankly, it wouldn't have been possible without support from those supporters out there. So if you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, I could potentially spare £3 a month for twice the podcast content and that giveaway actually at the moment as well, the 36,000 FIFA point giveaway, then as I always say, it's so greatly appreciated. You can keep the podcast going and get plenty in return too. It's really quick and easy to sign up. You can go to bit.ly/𝗏𝗡23 points. That's bit.ly/𝗏𝗡23 points, or just search support for weekly. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and let's jump back into the podcast. Hello, welcome back after the break. We're going to start by talking about crossing, as I mentioned. Unfortunately, we don't have 𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗀, the crosser himself, but I'm interested to know, and 𝘵𝘀𝘀 is, whether crossing is effective and any tips for it.
I think crossing is the most broken it's been since I've started playing FIFA, and I've not played FIFA during the 13, 14 days or whenever it was the thing to do. And the reason for that is, well, one, crosses are assisted and accurate, right? And I think it's the way it's always been in FIFA.
Have you got your settings set to assisted or semi-assisted?
Default, whatever is default. And I think that's assisted on crossing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think crossing is the most effective it's ever been. One, because it's always pretty much accurate, especially if you do it after a ball roll. I think that's kind of a pro tip/tactic that I can share, that everything you do after a ball roll is pretty precise, especially ground passes. But a thing of mine is to kind of ball roll inside and cross far post. So especially when I see someone just running in the box, regardless if they're alone, if they're marked, if there's two people on them, it does not matter. I just ball roll and cross. And the main reason for crossing to be effective this year is because regardless of what your air ball switching settings are, whether it's manual, loose balls, air balls, whatever, I believe, and I can confidently say that the system they have in place this year for kind of locking you on as a defensive team on air balls doesn't work properly, or doesn't work as intended.
Yeah.
Even if by some chance you get the correct defender switched on a air ball, the moment you decide to clear it, the defender jumps like 2 feet, 2 yards, I don't know measurements, but 2 meters away from the ball and tries to head like just the air. And it looks really funny on replays. It's absurd. They just don't calculate the trajectory properly. So you're always left with a free header. And more often than not, if you have the composure, just chest it down, because no one's really going to be attacking you anyways, and just have a free shot on goal from the edge of the small penalty box. So I do think it's really effective. I don't like that it's effective because there's no real counter to it, but it is effective, yeah.
If you grab one of the players in proximity to the attacker that they're going to cross to, can you just like stop your player competing for it and then try and block the resulting action?
In theory, yes. You have to,
but then I guess they get a free header potentially.
Yeah,
so it's not,
but in theory, you have 2 options. One is to use a mechanic that I don't think anyone really knows, not even pros, but like you have the cancel, which is the L2R2 that we all know, but you also have the super cancel, which is L2R2, L1R1. And if you are an octopus and you press all 4 of these triggers, bumpers at the same time, and you have the reaction to do it, whatever your player is doing, they stop doing it. So if you're running towards a loose ball and you press all four, the player will stop running towards that ball. Whereas if you cancel, he will still continue running towards that ball. He'll be locked on. So there's a few scenarios where that actually helps. That's one of them. You see a cross whipped in, you press all four, and then you're ready for kind of the knockdown or whatever. And the other thing is, which I kind of do as a workaround the airball issue, is because the game thinks you have possession of the ball. That's why you can't switch, you can't run away. You player lock. So you see your opponent crossing, you player lock, and you switch to another player, and you start running around freely with that defender. Whereas the AI is locked into the ball, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so you kind of try to intercept the pass or the knock-on or whatever the resulting play may be with the player you've player locked to. It's kind of complicated to explain, a lot easier to explain visually, but it's all of these are kind of workarounds the crossing kind of meta, I would say.
Yeah, because that's another question we had actually from 𝗏𝗏, who also asked about crossing, is how much are you using player lock? I've faced quite a few people recently using it to make it look like they're making a run, but then to switch back straight to the player that they were using before in the hope that you've kind of moved away from them and created more space. Is that the kind of situation you use it in? Are you using it quite a bit? Any tips on that?
I mean, I use a lot of player lock. When the mechanic was first introduced, I think a week into the game, I was doing some really creative plays just because I think I like that feature. I do think it's overpowered. And I think it's coming. It's been coming for a year and a half, just a player lock meta where every second pass is a player lock at pro level, just because it's very assisted. It allows you to kind of control 2 players at once, 3 players at once, because of you can bait a run, your opponent tracks it, and you switch to another player and he's free. So I think it's really effective. Definitely one of the most overpowered and unappreciated features out there. So I would advise people to learn how to use it. And even if you're not good at it, it just creates chaos and confusion. I know when people player lock against me, I'm like, oh, what do I do now? No, who do I defend? And most of the time I catch myself just being passive because I don't know what they want to do and I don't want to leave any gaps open.
When I player lock by accident, I don't know what to do either.
Exactly.
And I'm the attacking team.
Exactly. How are they supposed to defend you?
Yeah. I think it's a really good mechanic. I think the issue is that it may be too assisted, but I think that was partly to encourage people to use it more, I suppose. I'm sure they would, hopefully would balance it if it became more popular, because the thing about FIFA is that you don't control that many of the players. And that means that there's more variance. If you're controlling more players or had influence over more players on the pitch, I think the game would probably be more enjoyable. It would feel like you were having more impact and the kind of randomness would be less frustrating. But obviously that isn't the case. So something like player lock is doing that to some extent. I think that's good. I actually think that you should be able to use your, I don't know what people think about this, but you should be able to use your right analog stick. So you use your left analog stick to control one defender and your right analog stick to control another.
That's how 𝗏𝗏 should definitely work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I can see that it is something that would be quite difficult for people to get to grips with. But I think if we have player lock now, maybe it is something that could be brought in to balance that a bit.
Could be optional.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be required.
It could be a setting that you can choose to have one way or another if you wanted to. It would just allow kind of going to that next level of, as you said, kind of multitasking and having your brain work kind of overtime. If I'm not mistaken, another football game on the market, eFootball or PES or however, I think that's the way they have it, where you can have 2 cursors on your team and with both analogs steer it. And from the little I've played the game a year ago, it is really, really difficult. But I think that's maybe a positive. If you can do it, then fair play to you.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we come to someone who, despite me telling him continuously to do it, still hasn't mastered or even tried time finishing, I think.
Wow.
But player lock, I've mentioned it a few times in the pod. Have you ever had a play?
I mean, so my experience with player lock is that I would get into a dangerous position in the game, accidentally engage it because I was panicking, and then be very cross with it. I've dabbled and tried to get my head around it, but no, I'm lazy about learning those sorts of more counterintuitive mechanics, I suppose.
I see.
But like maybe it's a New Year's resolution. Maybe I should renew my commitment to trying to master timed finishing. Yeah. I get told off. I get told off in the Discord because I say time shooting and people mock me. So
it's all spare time that we do this in, right? Well, for most of us. So you're thinking, well, I don't want to spend my time necessarily going to school and learning something. But actually, for me, that's more enjoyable than grinding League SBCs, right? It's just, I guess that is like, for some people, learning a new skill in the game for gameplay is fun and rewarding. People play in different ways, and that's totally fine. Hey, talking of someone who does lots of League SBCs and enjoys that grind, but also seems to have come up with an interesting gameplay mechanic. Is it something that you are giving yourself credit for, Josh? Or?
No, I have to respect, not just because he employs me, but 𝘵𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂 was the first person I saw do it. And if you're going to time shots, this is the thing that will get you into timed finishing. Although this is more shooting because there's nothing about this that's like a tap-in finish. If you flick the ball up by pressing in your thumbstick and then power shot from literally like any angle, really, and you can manually aim it fairly well, it's got a really decent chance of going in. And if you time it with someone with like 70 plus long shots, it's definitely going in. Like I've never seen, I remember back in, I think it was like FIFA 13 or something, where if you were kind of just inside the opposition's half, you could take a shot, and because the keeper was like stood on the edge of the box, it would go over their head and into the net, and you could score like these ridiculous long shots. And this is the most like it FIFA has been for 6 or 7 years for me. It's hilariously broken, and I'm sure will get patched at some point, but there is absolutely like a skill gap to it because, as I say, it's manually, you've got to manually position it correctly, and you need space because in order to kind of get the wind up to hit the shot and get the pop off, you need space in midfield. But if you've got somebody who sits very deep, is not putting a lot of pressure on in midfield, do it once, they will be trying to press you every time after that because it is honestly so broken and really, really fun.
Yeah, see, I'm gonna learn that before I learn time finishing, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you need to do both, unfortunately. Or is it?
You don't have to do both, but it definitely helps. Much like with the 𝘵𝑚𝑒𝑙𝑎s, like when they got patched, they weren't as broken as they were pre-patched. But if you time them, you can still get the same kind of animations and still have the same results. So that's the kind of, if you want to score really nice long ranges, timing is massive.
No, that's a good point.
It's every game. Nice. Just saying, it is still broken.
Yeah.
it is. No, it is still broken. I'm not saying it's not broken, but like the kind of doing it from anywhere without timing it with players like weak foots and stuff, that got a little bit more difficult. But if you time it, it's back.
𝘵𝗵𝗽𝘂𝘂𝘂.
Yeah, 𝘵𝗵𝗃𝗃 is actually finesse shots with 𝘵𝗵𝗃𝗃 are really good, which is not the case for every player. And actually, Ivan, I think we agree on this. I feel like maybe we've talked about it before, but it is frustrating that what they did was nerf the outside foot shot, but not by very much, really. When it's clearly, for me, and I can see it on replays, it's goalkeepers that are the issue, right?
Most definitely. It was the same with finesse shots, I think, either last year or the year before. I kind of lose track. It's always been the goalkeepers. It's not the shot itself. The shot itself is fine. It's the way keepers react to it that's not good.
Yeah.
And keepers, speaking of it, it's a weird one. Speaking of a gameplay mechanic, and we've talked about it at pro level between each other and kind of as feedback. But the other day I actually saw it on Reddit, which if I see a gameplay issue on Reddit, it means that it is a big gameplay issue. And it's about keepers being overpowered in a way that when you bring them out to close down an attacker, they're really, really quick and there's little counter to it. The main counter to someone rushing their goalkeeper out is heel to ball roll, for those that don't know. But you can't ball roll anymore. You can't run past them. And most of the times, you don't have the time to settle the ball to take a good shot because they're really just that quick. Especially when they dive towards you. So they close the angle as well at a ridiculous pace. So I think it's a massive, massive issues in terms of finishing, especially with how hard sometimes it is to get in a 1v1. It is a huge issue.
Interesting you mentioned heel to ball roll. So it's the new heel to heel, isn't it? As a good way to avoid it. So it's quite easy to do actually.
If you just run towards the keeper and you heel to ball roll instead of just ball roll, you will find that the keeper kind of gets lost and you have a free net to score.
Okay, that's good to know. So it's just hold L1 or LB and then go forwards and backwards on your right stick. So it is quite a straightforward one. It's a really good skill just generally to learn. If you're looking to learn one, definitely go for that one. It's new this year. Looks kind of cool as well. I've done regular heel to heels and they're kind of all right. But I think heel to ball roll would be better. Also, I guess passing it if you can, but I rarely find that the pass is on in that situation. So, Brammers, did you want to add something in?
No, I was just going to say that this is why you should vote for 𝘵𝘂𝗰𝘀𝘁 for pound powerhouse, because I was saying, he just races out a goal and I would say at least 7-8 times out of 10 he's getting there before the player realizes and can react.
Yeah, if you're quick on the keeper charge, and with him even more so, it is really advantageous, and I'd recommend people to do it. We're talking about this on the content pod too. And the final thing I was going to say, I'll just whip round and ask this question about the ball bouncing back to opponents after manual tackles. This is something that Dom asks. Lots of people ask. It's something that, apart from I think last cycle, has just been a regular thing people have brought up. The fact that manual tackling often is punished because you end up tackling the ball back to your opponent. Is there anything, Ivan, that you've found which has been effective at stopping this? And do you think it is worse than last year? It certainly seems like it is. I felt like last year was pretty good. There wasn't too much of it.
Yeah, so the most effective thing to do to avoid tackling and the ball bouncing back to your opponent is to not tackle. That's what I found most effective for me. In all seriousness, I don't think there's something you can do about it. I think tackling and interceptions are more rewarding to the attacker than they should be. So I've learned to just defend more passively and not bring out my defenders, my center backs, even when I'm sure I'm going to get the tackle in. And one of those where I just let them run into me and tackle them. And if it just goes back, I still at least have my defender in position. So unfortunately, I do think it is worse than previous years, but it's one of those where you just sit, hope for a patch, hope for a fix, and kind of learn to deal with it and work around it.
Yeah. I'll also say, I don't know whether Josh is something you've noticed, but the discrepancy between the quality of attacker and defender does make a big difference. Like Lucio versus, an average reaction, aggression, dribbling, ball control player. He's pretty much always going to win the tackle and with the ball. But if you're up against 𝘵𝘃 with, regular Varane, you're in trouble, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I was actually quite happy to hear Ivan say it earlier that the defending stat is important this year. The number of people I see using really attacking midfielders, and especially among content creators, then complaining when a midfielder doesn't intercept something or doesn't put a leg out, and you're going, they've got like 65 interceptions. Of course they're not going to go and throw a leg out like the opponent's centre-back is going to do. There is a massive, massive importance to it this year. In terms of getting the ball back, now I used to play the other game. I used to play 𝘵𝘂 quite a lot, and there was an update where they brought out, because that had a big issue with the ball bouncing back to your opponent when you tackled, and they said, we're going to release all physics that we do when a tackle is made, and the ball bouncing back to your opponent got even worse, i.e. they weren't affecting the power that was given into the ball or, modifying the direction, and it got worse solely because when you have somebody moving with a lot of momentum in one direction and they're kicking a ball, usually you tackle it into them and it kind of bounces back into their path. FIFA do actively change the direction of a ball after a tackle. They've shown it before in patch notes or pitch notes. They've shown that they change the velocity and direction in tackles. And I just think it's not great this year. I think it's still within the realms of probability, but I think this is where a real life representation of what a ball would physically actually do in that situation and what should happen in a video game where you've timed a tackle perfectly are two different things. And I do think that's where the frustration comes as a player, because even if it's maybe realistic, if I've timed it well, I want the ball back. I don't want him in one-on-one and there's nothing I can do because my player's lying on the floor.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because Brammers, in real football, you see a player, especially a centre-back, make a tackle and actually recover the ball, there'll be an applause from the crowd, right? It's something that isn't actually that common in real football and is something that is very high skill. So although it's incredibly frustrating to see the ball bounce back, it probably is realistic. It just isn't something that should be in the game, and that's what Josh is saying. And actually last year, I remember in the pitch notes, they said basically they'd made a special effort to make the game, essentially, they didn't say this, less realistic so that the ball wasn't going back to your opponent when you tackled. And I think we probably need that again because I think they've let it slip a bit this year.
Yeah, I think Josh's explanation of it was excellent. I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I think the thing that is an X factor here is that sort of player behavior in video games is much more aggressive, and there is no risk factor. Like, you don't have people pulling out of challenges at the last minute because they know they're going to get hurt. If anything, in FIFA, it's the opposite. People go in harder because they know there's no danger, and they want to they want that ball. And you know, that adds something to the mix that is very hard to spin into something that feels rewarding whilst also seeming realistic.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're in a bit of a troubled spot, but the fact that they managed to get it under control last year suggests that there is a way to do it, and they probably just need to find their way back to that.
Yeah, agreed. And that's a good point to end it, I think. Some good questions, actually. We didn't get to, I think, all of them. They'll, I'm sure, get brought in the listener questions in a future week. Continue to ask those via @FootWeeklyPod, footweekly@mail.com, or in the Pod Priority Questions channel in the Discord. Right then, Ivan, Dr. Nightwatch, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's always great to have your expertise.
Thanks for having me again, and wish everyone a nice year and a nice FIFA 23.
Indeed. And actually, where can people catch you? Because I know you do a bit of streaming here and there. You're certainly on Twitter.
Twitter @DrNightWatch, and from there, same socials in terms of Twitch and Instagram, but mostly through Twitter.
Yeah, and we should say it's night as in the nighttime.
Yes.
Not the man in shining armor.
Yes.
But yeah, good to clarify that. Thank you, Ivan. And thank you very much as well to Josh, aka SpreadsheetFIFA, which is where you can find Josh. If you didn't hear him talking about League SBCs and you think, I'd like some of that, we talk about it on the Supporter content episode, but Josh will have plenty on his social media and various other places too.
Indeed. Thank you for having me on. I've learned something new today. The heel to heel ball roll round the keeper. I've never even thought to try it before. So yeah, that will enter my lexicon now.
Yeah, looking forward to trying that too. And finally, a man who's definitely looking forward to trying lots of new gameplay things, Brammers.
Yeah.
Great to have you back on 2 podcasts.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely. Yes, I've got lots of homework and I won't show my face again unless I have actually attended to some of it.
Yeah, and actually, if anyone decides to, then let us know how you get on. These things are, I think, fun to learn. And what else is fun? A 36,000 FIFA point giveaway going on the Patreon at the moment. If you're a supporter, get involved. If you're not yet a supporter, then it's a great time to support. Remember, you get an extra podcast every week. This week it'd be the content pod, next week gameplay. It's just £3 a month. It's super easy and convenient to join up. You can go to bit.ly/pod23points or just search support Foot Weekly. If you do consider it, then thank you very much. And if not, perhaps you consider subscribing via the various different podcast platforms so you can get this main feed podcast into your podcast providing app. If you're listening on YouTube, then drop a like, leave a comment. It really helps. And finally, a big thanks to all those supporters keeping the podcast going, including those icon patrons: Dave B, 𝘭𝘰𝘬𝘀, Coach Vass, DJ FIFA Player, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, Dan W, Waterman, Jake G, Roger D, Springford, Alec, Bracco, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add, though. FIFA's a bit like life, really. It has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.